Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Charles, and I welcome you guys to another episode of the Dreamerspro Show, where we cover everything from sports, hot topics, classic debates, entertainment, and when we give you guys a fresh perspective on things and how we see them. Now, today we have a pretty interesting episode for you guys, but before we get into it, make sure you go ahead and like the video and subscribe to the channel. And also, if you're not following us on Instagram, make sure you follow us on Instagram at Dreamerspro. Search us on Instagram. We respond to a lot of questions on there, so make sure you do that. Anyway, let me get into this topic here, because I have some things that I want to get off my chest. We put up a poll on our channel about, I'm going to say about 30 minutes ago or so, right? And on this poll, we basically posed a question to our audience. And the question was this. We asked them, has the Brooklyn Nets experiment been a failure? And in about 28 minutes, it all depends, obviously, when you're going to see this video, probably hours later. In about 28 minutes, we have about 974 votes. So roughly 1,000, a good sample size. 92% of the people that have voted on that poll has said, yes, this thing has been it hasn't worked. It's been a failure. Most people have agreed that, listen, this thing hasn't worked. Listen, the Brooklyn Nets, that team is one of the most head-scratching stories in terms of NBA teams and sports stories in the NBA probably in the last 5 seasons. There hasn't been a story like that of the Brooklyn Nets. 2 years ago, last season, they assembled this big three that initially a lot of us thought was, not going to work because none of these guys play defense. None of those, their big three, James Harden, Kevin Durant, nor Kyrie Irving had ever made an all-defensive team before in their entire careers. They were just going to be an offensive juggernaut. Many of us had questions about them. How's it going to work? There's only one ball. These are two really ball-dominant guys. So once we started seeing this team play, and I saw them get to go against my Clippers, and I saw Kawhi Leonard and Paul George and these guys essentially play a perfect game in Brooklyn. And then in the last 2 minutes of the game, Kyrie, Kevin Durant, and KD just came back and hit like 5 straight field goals and bust the game wide open, and they won the game. I said to myself, listen, I don't think there's going to be any team out there that's going to be able to deal with this team because of their offensive firepower. They were the only team in the NBA that had a trio that on any given night can put up between 60 to 90 points or 75. In fact, they average around 75 points together. They were the only team in the NBA that had that type of firepower where on any given night they can give you anywhere from 75 to 90 points on any given night. They were the only team that had that. And I thought that with that nucleus of players, that trio of players, they were destined to win the championship. So what happened last season? Last season, the same thing that happens to every team in the NBA. They had to deal with injuries. So many players got injured. Anthony Davis, Kawhi Leonard, Donovan Mitchell, Giannis Antetokounmpo at one point, James Harden, Kyrie Irving. People got injured left and right. So the Nets didn't make it to the NBA finals. Some people thought that they would. Fine. We come into this season, and most people had high hopes. But then the mandate situation popped off in New York, and ultimately, Kyrie Irving could not play or refused to get vaccinated, and therefore he didn't want to play. It wasn't that Kyrie wasn't allowed to play. They said, this is the new regulation, and if you want to play, you have to do this. Kyrie said, no, I'm not going to do that. So therefore, he wasn't allowed to play. It was a decision. Now, ultimately, some people say, well, his decision was influenced by what, the mandate that came down. That's neither here nor there. That's not what I'm here to argue about moving forward. So, nevertheless, Kyrie couldn't play for a decent amount of the season. I think he only played for about 20 something or so games. Fine. They come back, or rather, before that happens, James Harden says, I want out of there. He leaves. Right? So before we even got to see this trio really get into their groove, James Harden skipped town. He went to go play with the Philadelphia 76ers. Y'all know what happened. The Brooklyn Nets made it to the playoffs, and it ended up getting swept in round 1, not winning a single game after that. After that series, subsequently, Kyrie Irving basically came out and started making some bizarre statements talking about how, we're going to be managing the team, me, KD, the owner, and all that. And people that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And people were like, wait a minute, when did you become a manager of the team? Michael Jordan himself never managed the Chicago Bulls. So if Michael Jordan never managed the Chicago Bulls, what makes you think in your mind that you're going to be able to? So that's what happened. And now, according to a report that we're getting from CBSSports.com that I want to get into here quickly, basically the Nets are saying that they're unwilling to extend Kyrie Irving. So let me get into this here. The article starts off, Nets unwilling to give Kyrie Irving long-term contract per report. The article continues on. To say the Brooklyn Nets season was a disappointment would be a massive understatement. This is a team that entering the season was considered a title favorite, but instead Brooklyn was swept in the first round of the playoffs by the Boston Celtics, leaving the Nets as the only team this postseason that didn't win a single game. The article continues on. Several factors played into that outcome as James Harden's forced trade to the Philadelphia 76ers left the Nets down a star player as their return piece. Ben Simmons didn't suit up for a single game. Then there's even the bigger Kyrie factor. Kyrie only played 29 games this season, due partly because of the New York City's vaccine mandate and also because the Nets' unwillingness to have him play in road games until January. There was also the Kevin Durant MCL injury that forced him to miss over a month and a half of games. And the article continues on. The Nets' championship hopes hinge on an amicable solution with Kyrie Irving, whose personal decision not to get vaccinated and unpredictable injury history have left the Nets hesitant and now, according to a source familiar with the Nets' thought process, outright unwilling to give him a long-term extension. And the article finally continues on to say that's a pretty strong switch in stance from the Nets compared to when general manager Sean Marks said prior to the start of the season that he was confident Irving would sign an extension before training camp. Marks also said Harden would be signed to an extension, but the universe clearly had other plans as well. So basically, that's what the article had to say. And now the Nets are seemingly unwilling to extend Kyrie Irving. I have a bunch of things I want to talk about. I recently stumbled upon a report on Facebook where they said that one of the teams that could potentially be interested in signing Kyrie Irving, were he to opt out and not pick up his player option, basically would be the Los Angeles Clippers. We put that on the channel as well. We put that up to a vote. And if I pull up the vote here, I'm not sure if I still have access to that vote. I still believe I do. Of the 15,000 people that voted on that just around 2 days ago, 64% of the people said no, they don't want Kyrie Irving to join the Los Angeles Clippers, that they think will be a bad idea. In my personal opinion, I do think it would be a bad idea. Personally, not because of what Kyrie Irving brings on the floor with his offensive talents, for two reasons. Number one, I think the Clippers are the most complete basketball team in the NBA. And when they get back Kawhi Leonard and Paul George and they're healthy, I think they're going to be probably one of the the Western Conference favorites to make it to the NBA championship next season. I don't see why you would want to tamper with that. And if you were to get Kyrie Irving, you may lose some pieces. And I don't know if the Clippers have enough cap space. And I'm just not sure that's what they want to do. But who knows? But for me, I just don't think it would be a good fit, in my personal opinion. I think they're a well-oiled machine, and I don't see how it's going to work. Another reason is because of the chemistry thing. Now, I want us to omit what has happened with Kyrie Irving in Brooklyn, and let's just go back to Boston. It didn't work there. Talking down the players and the history, that didn't work there. Of course, you have the fallout with him and LeBron James. I don't need that to be a part of what's happening with Kawhi Leonard. Have you seen Kawhi Leonard's face? Have y'all seen Kawhi Leonard? Kawhi Leonard looks like he's one of these guys that just doesn't have the patience for all of that. So I don't think that's going to work. But to my larger point here, listen, if the Nets don't extend Kyrie, I think that the situation with the Brooklyn Nets, I think all of us will need to start considering it to be one of the biggest sports failures, at least in the NBA, in the last 10 years or so. Because I think ultimately what's going to happen is this. If Kyrie Irving leaves or they don't extend him, well, Kevin Durant is going to be left with who? Ben Simmons? So it started off as KD going to Brooklyn to play with Kyrie. Then he got James Harden. Then he lost James Harden, got Ben Simmons, who didn't play one single dribble last season. Then he would lose Kyrie and be left with Ben Simmons. What? That's who Kevin Durant will be left with to play with? If Kyrie were to leave, I think I've read it somewhere that some people have speculated that maybe KD would request a trade. And then where would KD go? There's some other people that say, no. You can trade Kyrie straight up for Russell Westbrook and send him to the Lakers. And then, Russell, but who the hell wants to play with Russell? Did y'all just watch Russell Westbrook? That's going to work? Didn't we see that already? So we got to see them in Oklahoma, and it didn't work for about 7 to 8 seasons. And now they're going to be much older, and it's going to work now? Like, why would that? So to me, listen, I think this entire thing is a total mess. This is another mess. And it's no surprise that the teams with the most drama are usually the teams that don't do well. And in this case, you can look at the Lakers, you can look at the Brooklyn Nets. I don't really know what to say anymore, but it seems like people are beginning to think that this thing is not going to work. And I don't have any confidence that this thing is going to work moving into the future. I don't have any, there's not a shred of evidence that will make me think so, especially given the fact that they've added Ben Simmons to that roster.